Good day to you, and what are you doing for dinner tonight? Do you know? Is it going to be pizza? How about Chinese? How about sushi? Yeah, isn't it interesting that of those three choices, all three of them are from other countries. They are imported styles of eating and imported foods right here in our country. After all, we are a melting pot, right? We are a nation of immigrants, and we continue to meld together from the people that have come from other parts of the world. So it makes sense, right, that you should be able to walk into a Wawa and pick up a newspaper from Canada. It makes sense that you should be able to turn on your television and watch a French film. It makes sense, does it not, that you should be able to get content from media that are originating in other parts of the world? Well, that's not exactly the case here in the U.S., and we're going to talk about why that is, along with the other countries today, because that's what we're talking about in this instructor video. We're talking about imports and exports. We're talking about imported media, media that comes into a country, and we're talking about exported media, media that leaves a country. Remember back to our chapter on globalization, that one of the driving factors of globalization was companies seeking out foreign markets. Seeking out foreign markets because the internal markets, the domestic markets, had reached capacity in terms of people being willing to watch a TV show or read a newspaper or purchase a magazine. And so they look elsewhere, they look to foreign countries. And that's part of what is driving imports and exports. I do use three terms to describe, generally speaking, the way that a country appears in terms of its imports and exports. Those three terms are ethnocentric countries. Those are countries ethnocentric that that the world is revolving around them. And so they are an importer. Sorry, I got that completely backwards there. I got distracted by looking away at my notes there. The ethnocentric countries are very self-centered, and that is one of the reasons why their media are exported. They are concerned with themselves, and so they consume a lot of their own information, and they don't have a lot of interest in other countries' media content. So they send content around the world, and very little content comes into them. That would be an ethnocentric country. And that's compared with an exocentric country, which is the opposite. Those are smaller countries. They're more vulnerable. They may be poor. They may have a lot of countries surrounding them. They may have land that is not that sustainable. And so they're fragile. And therefore, they can't really focus on producing media content because they're trying to focus on feeding the population. And so they end up sucking in media content from other areas of the world. And those are exocentric countries. They are importers. They don't export much at all. And in many cases, they don't even produce for themselves. And then we have world-centric. World-centric has that roughly even balance. Those are countries that are big exporters, and they are also big importers of media content. And if you were to look at their TV schedule in the evening, you might find 50% of the content being from that country and another 50% coming from other parts of the world. So now let's take a look individually at each of the countries in the book, and we'll start with France. And France, with imports, it really imports a lot of newspapers. I've been all over France, and almost every newsstand that I go to, it doesn't matter whether I'm in a big city like Paris or in a small town, those newsstands have USA Today, for example. They have Italian newspapers, they have Spanish newspapers, they have Arabic newspapers. France is very world-centric when it comes to newspapers. It has a lot of newspapers coming in, and as we will find out later, a lot of newspapers going out. When it comes to radio in France, okay, we have some limitations here, as we've already learned in this class, that France is trying not to let the French language be diluted anymore, so it does have quotas on how much imported programming can come in. However, within that restriction, you do find it fairly common to hear English-speaking songs on the radio. So there is a fair amount of imported media coming into France radio-wise. And actually, the idea of the U.S. radio format is something that we find all over the world. The U.S. developed this idea of a radio format where you have a niche content that you're airing. So it's just going to be top 40, or it's just going to be R&B, for example. It's not going to be both together, and you're not going to mix in Frank Sinatra or lots of other artists. And so the American radio format with the fast-talking DJ and the commercials and the teasing of songs across commercials. What do you see we have coming up? The latest by Bruno Mars, and then onto a commercial. That's all very American, and you can find that not just in France, but all over the world. That the idea of that format is being imported, not so much the content. When it comes to TV in France, it's very common to see UK and US programs on French TV in the evening. And remember, the way that they come into France, the French are not going to allow those programs to air with the English language being spoken. No, they dub their own French actors' voices over those TV programs, and then they put subtitles up on the screen. When it comes to newspapers, as I've already hinted at, newspapers are a big export from France. So you have Le Figaro, you have Le Monde. Those are two very big newspapers. You can find them even here in the United States and in New York and LA and big cities, but you'll find them all over Europe. Those are newspapers that go all over the world. In fact, Le Monde means the world. And then you have radio, and radio is exported from France to Francophone countries. Those are countries that speak French, primarily because of the French colonial period. And they can include parts of countries too, like Quebec in Canada, or they can use whole countries like French Guiana, or Martinique in the Caribbean is another French property, or Haiti is another French property, or former French property, I should say. And so that's where you see radio being aired. French radio made in France is aired in those countries. TV-wise, same thing. You have TV programs going to the Francophone countries. So overall, France is a fairly world-centric country when it comes to imports and exports media-wise. Sweden's a different story. Sweden, imports-wise, with newspapers, not many. It's really hard to find a foreign newspaper. It's even hard to find a Danish newspaper in Sweden, or a Finnish newspaper, or a Norwegian newspaper, and those are Scandinavian countries. So Sweden is very much into reading its own newspapers. When it comes to radio, there are lots and lots of English-speaking songs on Swedish radio, and even DJs that are Swedish are using American phrases, American phraseology when they're on the air. They'll say "LOL," for example, even though in Swedish it's going to be completely different letters. When it comes to exports for Sweden, newspapers do follow Swedes where they go on vacation. So they go to Germany on vacation a lot, and you will see some Swedish newspapers. But other than that, you don't find many Swedish newspapers being exported. And also radio, it's very difficult to find Swedish radio outside of Scandinavia. I'm quite confident that nobody in this class has ever heard Swedish radio. It's just not exported. And the same goes for TV for the most part as well. All right, when it comes to the UK has newspapers that are common to find in many countries, not all countries, but many countries where you have English taking vacations, and they go to all parts of the world. But also you will just find some English newspapers being offered in other countries simply because they are English newspapers. In the English language is what I mean to say. So the Times, for example, is a newspaper that you find around. The Sun is a tabloid that you sometimes will find around. When it comes to radio, you will find that radio is penetrated by French radio, because there's a 28-mile stretch where there's only a difference of 28 miles between France and England along the English Channel, so radio signals can reach there. But other than that, England's an island, remember, so you don't have a lot of radio coming over into England. When it comes to TV, there is tons and tons of programs from the outside world, particularly the United States. And any given day, there will be 3 or 4 really current TV series that are running. I would say right now that probably The Big Bang Theory is running current, not old episodes, running on English television. There's a lot of American television, really a lot of television from all over the world. So overall, the UK is rather world-centric. Now we come over to the United States. The United States is a different story. Imports-wise, as I started out this video lecture, there are newspapers that are coming in just very small doses. There are some Spanish-speaking newspapers, but you cannot go into the Wawa Harity Stroudsburg University and pick up a Canadian newspaper, even though Canada is only 6.5 hours away. How crazy is that, that we can't pick up a very basic way of getting to know our northerly neighbor? And that's because there just are no newspapers. I mean, look around. The next time you go into a Wawa or an Exxon or a Rite Aid or wherever you are, look around at the newspapers. See if you see any single foreign newspaper. See if you see any newspaper from outside the United States or in another language other than English. It's just not the case. Radio, it's a similar story. You hear very, very few foreign songs. If you do, they're going to be from England, they're going to be from Canada, and you may not even be able to tell that the people singing them are from those parts of the world because the accent is getting modified to be American, like Justin Bieber. He sounds like an American, but he's Canadian. So we do have some radio coming in, but it kind of gets suited to our culture. When it comes to television, again, not much. I challenge you, turn on your TV, go through your broadcast channels. How far do you have to go before you come to any TV content that is from any other country? Maybe you're going to stumble upon a Survivor episode that's taking place in the Pacific Rim. Or maybe you're going to come across one of these eating shows where there's a restaurant that somebody's eating at in Asia. But by and large, you're not going to find French TV. You're not going to find Spanish TV. You're not going to find Mexican TV. You might find a little Canadian TV over on PBS. English TV is the most likely thing that you'll find because of our very close relationship with England as identified in a previous chapter. All right, so I'm going to pause now and come back and do a second part for this video.